Pet Cemetery, Chapter 1 by Stephen King. Louis Creed, who had lost his father at 3 and who had never known a grandfather, never expected to find a father as he entered his middle age, but that was exactly what happened. Although he called this man a friend, as a grown man must do when he finds the man who should have been his father relatively late in life, he met this man on an evening he and his wife and his 2 children moved into the big white framed house in Ludlow. Winston Churchill moved in with them. Churchill was his daughter Eileen's cat. The search committee at the university had moved slowly, and the hunt for the house within commuting distance of the university had been hair-raising. And by the time they neared the place where he believed the house to be, all the landmarks are right, like the astrological signs the night before Caesar was assassinated. Louis thought morbidly. They were all tired and tense and on edge. Gage was cutting teeth and fussed almost ceaselessly. He would not sleep, no matter how much Rachel sang to him. She offered him the breast, even though it was off his schedule. Gage knew his dining schedule as well as she, better, maybe, and he promptly bit her with his new teeth. Rachel, still not entirely sure about this move to Maine from Chicago, where she had lived her whole life, burst into tears. Eileen promptly joined her. In the back of the station wagon, Church continued to pace restlessly as he had done for the last 3 days it had taken them to drive here from Chicago. His yowling from the cat kennel had been bad, but his restless pacing after they finally gave up and sat him free in the car had been almost as unnerving. Louis himself felt a little like crying. A wild but not unattractive idea suddenly came to him. He would suggest that we go back to Bangor for something to eat. To eat while they waited for the moving van, and when his 3 hostages to fortune go out, he would fly the accelerator and drive away without so much as a look back, foot to the mat, the wagon's huge 4-barrel carburetor gobbling expensive gasoline. He would drive south all the way to Orlando, Florida, where he would get a job at Disney World as a medic under a new name. But before he hit the turnpike, big old 95 southbound, he would stop by the side of the road and put the fucking cat out too. Then they rounded a final curve, and there was the house that only he had seen up until now. He had flown out and looked at each of the 7 possibilities they had picked from photos. Once the position at the University of Maine was solidly his, and this was the one he had chosen. A big old New England colonial, but newly sided and insulated. The heating costs, while horrible enough, were not out of line in terms of consumption. 3 big rooms downstairs, 4 more up, a long shed that might be converted to more rooms later on, all of us surrounded by a luxuriant sprawl of lawn, lushly green even in the August heat. Beyond the house was a large field for the children to play in, and beyond the field were woods that went to damn near forever. The property abutted state lands, the realtor had explained, and there would be no development in the foreseeable future. The remains of the Micmac Indian tribe had laid claim to nearly 8,000 acres in Ludlow, and in the towns east of Ludlow, and the complicated litigation involving the federal government as well as that of the state might stretch into the next century. Rachel stopped crying abruptly. She sat up. That's it, Louis said. He felt apprehensive. No, he felt scared. In fact, he felt terrified. He had mortgaged 12 years of their lives for this. It wouldn't be paid off until Eileen was 17. He swallowed. What do you think? I think it's beautiful, Rachel said, and that was a huge weight off his chest and off his mind. She was kidding, he saw. It was in the way she was looking at it as they turned in the asphalted driveway that curved around to the shed and back. Her eyes sweeping the bank windows, her mind already ticking away at such matters as curtains and oilcloth for the cupboards, and God knew what else. Daddy, Elise said from the back seat. She had stopped crying as well. Even Gage had stopped fussing. Louis savored the silence. What, love? Her eyes, brown under the darkish blonde hair in the rearview mirror, also surveyed the house, the lawn, the roof of another house off to the left in the distance, and the big field stretching up to the woods. Is this home? It's going to be, honey, he said. Hooray, she shouted, almost taking his ear off. And Louis, who could sometimes become very irritated with Ellie, decided he didn't care if he even clapped an eye on Disney World in Orlando. He parked in front of the shed and turned off the wagon's motor. The engine ticked in the silence, which seemed very big after Chicago and the bustle of state streets and the loop. A bird sang sweetly in the late afternoon. Home, Rachel said softly, still looking at the house. Home, Gage said complacently on her lap. Louis and Rachel stared at each other. In the rearview mirror, Eileen's eyes widened. Did you? Did he? Was that? They all spoke together, then all laughed together. Gage took no notice. He only continued to suck his thumb. He had been saying ma for almost a month now and had taken a stab or two at something that might have been da, or only wishful things on Louis's part. But this, either by accident or imitation, had been a real word, home. Louis plucked Gage from his wife's lap and hugged him. That was how they came to Ludlow. Chapter 2. In Louis Creed's memory, that one moment always held a magical quality, partly perhaps because it was real magic, but mostly because the rest of the evening was so wild. In the next 3 hours, neither peace nor magic made an appearance. Louis had stored the house keys away neatly. He was a neat and methodic man, was Louis Creed, in a small manila envelope which he had labeled Ludlow House. Key received June 29. He had put the key away in the Fairlane's glove compartment. He was absolutely sure of that. Now they weren't there. While he hunted for them, growing increasingly irritated, Rachel hoisted Gage onto her hip and followed Eileen over to the tree in the field. He was checking under the seats for the third time when his daughter screamed and then began to cry. Louis, Rachel called. She cut herself. Eileen had fallen from the tire swing and hit a rock with her knee. The cut was shallow, but she was screaming like someone who had just lost a leg. Louis thought, a bit ungenerously. He glanced at the house across the road where a little light burned in the living room. All right, Elise said. That's enough. Those people over there will think something's being murdered. But it hurts. Louis struggled with the temper and went silently back to the wagon. The keys were gone, but the first aid kit was still in the glove compartment. He got it and came back. When Ellie saw it, she began to scream louder than ever. No, the stingy stuff. I don't want the stingy stuff, Daddy. No. Eileen, it's just mercurochrome, and it doesn't sting. Be a big girl, Rachel said. It's just, no. You want to stop that or your ass will sting, Louis said. She tried, Rachel said quietly. Yeah, I know the feeling. Hold her leg out. Rachel put Gage down and held Eileen's leg, which Louis painted with mercurochrome in spite of her increasing hysterical wails. Someone just came out on the porch of the house across the street, Rachel said. She picked Gage up. He had started to crawl away through the grass. Wonderful, Louis muttered. Lou, she's tired, I know. He capped the mercurochrome and looked grimly at her daughter. There, and it really didn't hurt a bit. Fess up, Ellie. It does hurt. It brr. His hand itched to slap her, and he grabbed his leg hard. Did you find the key? Rachel asked. No, not yet, Louis said, snapping the first aid kit closed and getting up. Gage began to scream. He was fussing or crying, but really screaming, writhing in Rachel's arms. What's wrong with you? Rachel cried, thrusting him almost blindly at Louis. It was, he supposed, one of the advantages of having married a doctor. You could shove the kid at your husband whenever the kid seemed to be dying. Louis, what's... The baby was grabbing frantically at his neck, screaming wildly. Louis flipped him over and saw an angry white knob rising on the side of Gage's neck, and there was also something on the strap of his jumper, something funny, squirming weakly. Eileen, what had become quieter, began to scream again. B. She jumped back, tripped over the same protruding rock on which she had already come a cropper, sat down hard and began to cry again in mingled pain, surprise, and fear. I'm going crazy, Louis thought wonderingly. Do something, Louis. Can't you do something? Go to get the stringer out. A voice began, then drawled. That's the ticket. Get the stinger out and put some baking soda on it. Bump'll go down. But the voice was so thick, with down east accent, that for a moment Louis' tired, confused mind refused to translate the dialect. Get the stinger out and put some baking soda on it. Till it go down. He turned and saw the old man of perhaps 70, a hale and healthy 70, standing there on the grass. He wore a bibbles over a blue chambray shirt that showed his thickly folded and wrinkled neck. His face was sunburned, and he was smoking on an unfiltered cigarette. As Louis looked at him, the old man pinched the cigarette out between his thumb and forefinger and pocketed it neatly. He held out his hand and smiled crookedly, a smile Lewis liked at once, and he was not a man who took to people. Not to tell you business, Doc, he said, and that was how Lewis met Judson Crandall, the man who should have been his father. He had watched them arrive from across the street, and he had come across to see if he could help when it seemed they were in a bit of a tight, as he put it. When Lewis held the baby on his shoulders, Crandall stepped near, looking at the swelling on Gage's neck, and reached out with one blocky, twisted hand. Rachel opened her mouth to protest. His hand looked terribly clumsy and almost as big as Gage's head, but before she could say a word, the old man's fingers had made a single decisive movement, as apt and deft as the fingers of a man walking cards across his knuckles or sending coins into conjurer's limbo, and the stinger lay in his palm. Big un, he remarked. No prize winner, but it'd do for a ribbon, I guess. Lewis burst out laughing. Crandall regarded him with that crooked smile and said, Ain't you corker, ain't she? What did he say, Mommy? Eileen said, and then Rachel burst out laughing too. Of course, it was terribly impolite, but somehow it was okay. Crandall pulled out a deck of Chesterfield Kings, pocketed one into the seamed corner of his mouth, nodded at them pleasantly as they laughed. Even Gage was courtly now, in spite of the swelling of the bee sting, and popped a wooden match alight with his thumbnail. The old have their tricks, Lewis thought. Small ones, but some of them are good ones. He stopped laughing and held out the hand that was supporting Gage's bottom. Gage decisively damp bottom. I'm pleased to meet you, Mr. Judd Crandall, he said and shook. You're the doc, I guess. Yes, Lewis Creed. This is my wife, Rachel, my daughter, Ellie, and the kid with the bee sting is Gage. Nice to know all of you. I don't mean to laugh. That is, we don't mean to laugh. It's just that we're a little tired. That, the understatement of it, caused him to giggle again. He felt totally exhausted. Crandall nodded. Of course you are, he said, which came out, course ya. He glanced at Rachel. Why don't you take your little boy and your daughter over to the house for a minute? Mrs. Creed, we can put some baking soda on a wash rag and cool that off some. My wife would like to say hello, too. She didn't get out too much. Arthritis got bad the last 2 or 3 years. Rachel glanced at Lewis, who nodded. That would be very kind of you, Mr. Crandall. Oh, I just answered to Judd, he said. There was a sudden look honk, a motor winding down, and then a big blue moving van was turning, lumbering into the driveway. Oh, Christ, and I didn't know where the key are, Lewis said. That's okay, Crandall said. I got a set. Mr. and Mrs. Cleveland, that lived there before, gave me a set. Oh, must have been 14, 15 years ago. They lived here a long time. John Cleveland was my wife's best friend. She died 2 years ago. Bill went to the old folks' apartment complex over in Orrington. I'll bring him back over. They belong to you now, anyways. You're very kind, Mr. Crandall, Rachel said. Not at all, he said, looking forward to having young uns around again. Except that the sound of this, as exotic to the Midwestern ear as a foreigner laugh, was yuns. You just want to watch them around the road, Mrs. Creed. Lots of big trucks on the road. Now that there was a sound of slamming doors as the moving men hopped out of the cab and began toward them. Ellie had wandered away a little, and now she said, Daddy, what's this? Lewis, who had started to meet the moving men, glanced back. At the edge of the field, the lawn stopped, and high summer grass took over. A path about 14 feet wide had been cut, smooth and close. It wound up the hill, curved through a low strand of bushes and a copse of birches, and out of sight. Looks like a path of some kind, Lewis said. Oh, aye, Crandall said, smiling. Tell you about it sometime, Missy. You want to come over and we'll fix your baby brother up? Sure, Ellie said, and then added with a certain hopefulness, Does the baking soda sting? Chapter 4. Crandall brought back the keys, but by then Lewis found his set. There was a space on the top of the glove compartment, and the small envelope had slipped down into the wiring. He fished it out and let the movers in. Crandall gave him the extra set. They were on an old, tarnished fob. Lewis thanked him and slipped them absently into the pocket, watching the movers take in boxes and dressers and bureaus and all the other things they had collected over the 10 years of their marriage. Seeing them this way, out of the boxes, he thought, and suddenly he felt sad and depressed. He guessed he was feeling what people called homesickness. Uprooted and transplanted, Crandall said, suddenly beside him, and Lewis jumped a little. You sound like you know the feeling, he said. No, I don't. Crandall lit a cigarette. Pop went the match, flaring brightly in the first early evening shadow. My dad built this house across the way, brought his wife there, and she was taken with child there, and the child was me, born in the year 1900. That makes you 1883, Crandall said, and Lewis was mildly relieved that he didn't add years young, a phrase he accordingly detested. You look a lot younger than that. Crandall shrugged. Anyways, I've always lived there. I joined up when we fought the Great War, but the closest I've got to Europe was Bayonne, New Jersey. Nasty place. Even in 1917, it was a nasty place. I was just as glad to come back here. Got married to my Norma, put in my time on the railroad, and here we still are. But I've seen a lot of life right here in Ludlow, I sure have. The moving men stopped by the shed entrance, holding the box springs, and went under the big double bed he and Rachel shared. What do you want? Where do you want this, Mr. Creed? Upstairs. Just a minute, I'll show you. He started toward them and paused for a moment and glanced back at Crandall. You go on, Crandall said, smiling. I'll see how you old folks make out. Send them back over and get out of the way. But moving is mighty thirsty work. I usually sit on my porch about 9 and have a couple of beers in warm weather. I like to watch the night come on. Sometimes Norma joins me. You come over if you are in mind. Well, maybe I will, Lewis said, not intending to at all. The next thing would be an informal and free diagnosis of Norma's arthritis on the porch. He, like Crandall, liked his crooked grin, his overhand way of talking, his Yankee accent, which was not hard-edged at all, but so soft it was almost a drawl. A good man, Lewis thought, but doctors became leery of people fast. It was unfortunate, but sooner or later, even your best friend wanted medical advice, and with old people there was no end to it. But don't look for me or stay up. We've had a hell of a day. Just so long as you know. You don't need an engraved invitation, Crandall said, and there was something in the man's crooked grin that made Lewis feel that Crandall knew exactly what Lewis was thinking. He watched the old guy for a moment before joining the movers. Crandall walked straight and easily, like a man of 60 instead of over 80. Lewis felt that the first faint tug of affection. Chapter 5. By 9 o'clock, the movers were gone. Ellie and Gage, both exhausted, were sleeping in their new rooms, Gage in his crib. Ellie on a mattress, on the floor, surrounded by a foothill of boxes, her billions of Crayolas, whole, broken, and blunted, her Sesame Street posters, her picture books, her clothes, heaven knew what else. And of course, Church was with her, also sleeping and growling rustly in the back of his throat. That rustly growl seemed to be the closest the big Tom could come to purring. Rachel had prowled the house restlessly with Gage in her arms earlier, second-guessing the places where Lewis had told the movers to leave things, getting them to rearrange, change, or restack. Lewis had not lost their check. It was still in the breast pocket, although within the $5 bills he had put aside for a tip. When the van was finally emptied, he handed both the check and the cash over, nodded at their thanks, signed the bill of receipt, and stood on the porch, watching them head back to their big truck. He supposed they would probably stop over in the Bangor and have a few beers to lay the dust. A couple of beers would go down well right now. That made him think of Judd Crandall again. He and Rachel sat at the kitchen table, and he saw the circles under her eyes. You, he said, go to bed. Doctor's orders, she asked, smiling a little. Yeah. Okay, she said, standing. I'm beat, and Gage is apt to be up in the night. You coming? He hesitated. I don't think so, just yet. The old fellow across the street. Road, you call it, a road out in the country. Or if you're Judson Crandall, I guess you call it a rud. Okay, across the rud, he invited me over for a beer. I think I'm going to take him up on it. I'm tired, but I'm too jevved up to sleep. Rachel smiled. You'll end up getting Norma Crandall to tell you where it hurts and what kind of mattress she sleeps on. Lewis laughed, thinking how funny and scary it was that wives could read their husbands' minds after a while. He was here and he needed it, he said. I can do him a favor, I guess. Barter system? He shrugged, unwilling and unsure how to tell her that he had taken a liking to Crandall on short notice. How's his wife? Very sweet, Rachel said. Gage sat on her lap. I was surprised because he's had a hard day, and he doesn't take very well to new people on short notice under the best of circumstances. And she had a dolly she let Aileen play with. How bad would you say her arthritis is? Quite bad. In a wheelchair? No. But she walks very slowly, and her fingers, Rachel held her own slim fingers up and hooked them into claws to demonstrate, Lewis added. Anyways, don't be late, Lou. I got the creeps in strange houses. I won't be strange for long, Lewis said and kissed her. Chapter 6. Lewis came back late, feeling small. No one asked him to examine Norma Crandall. When he crossed the street, Rudd, he reminded himself, smiling. The lady had already retired for the night. Judd was a vague silhouette behind the screens of the enclosed porch. There was the comfortable squeak of a rocker on an old linoleum. Lewis knocked on the screen door, which rattled complacently against its frame. Crandall's cigarette glue like a large, peaceable firefly in a summer darkness. After a radio low came the voice of the Red Sox games, and all of it gave Lewis Creed the oldest feeling of coming home. Doc, Crandall said, I thought that was you. Hope you meant it about the beer, Lewis said, coming in. Oh, about a beer I never lie, Crandall said. A man who lies about beer makes enemies. Sit down, Doc. I put an extra couple on ice just in case. The porch was long and narrow, furnished with rattan chairs and sofas. Lewis sank into one and was surprised at how comfortable it was, as his felt hand was a tin pail filled with ice and a few cans of Black Label. He took one. Thank you, he said, and opened it. The first two swallows his throat like a blessing. More and welcome, Crandall said. I hope your time here will be a happy one, Doc. Amen, Lewis said. Say, if you want crackers or something, I could get some. I got a wedge of rats that's just about ripe. A wedge of what? Rat cheese, Crandall sounded faintly amused. Thanks, but just beer will do me. Well, then, we'll just let her go. Crandall belched contentedly. Your wife going to bed? Lewis asked, wondering why he was opening the door like this. Sometimes she stays up, sometimes she don't. Her arthritis is quite painful, isn't it? You can see a case that wasn't, Crandall asked. You ever see a case that wasn't? Crandall asked. Lewis shook his head. I guess it's tolerable, Crandall said. She don't complain much. She's a good girl. My Norma. There was a great and simple weight of affection in his voice. Out on Route 15, a tanker truck droned by, one so big and long that for a moment Lewis couldn't see his house across the road. Written on the side, just visible in the last light, was the word Orenco. One hell of a big truck, Lewis commented. Orenco's near Orrington, Crandall said. Chemical fertilizer factory. They come and go all night, all right. And the oil tankers and the dump trucks, and the people who go to work in Bangor or Brewer and come back at night. He shook his head. That's the one thing about Ludlow I don't like anymore. That friggin' road, no peace from it. They go all day and all night. Wakes Norma up sometimes. Hell, wakes me up sometimes and I sleep like a goddamn log. Lewis, who thought this strange Maine landscape almost eerily quiet after the constant roar of Chicago, only nodded his head. One day soon the Arabs will pull the plug and they'll be able to grow African violets right down the yellow line, Crandall said. You might be right, Lewis tilted his can back and was surprised to find it empty. Crandall laughed. You just grab yourself one to grow on, Doc. Lewis hesitated and then said, all right, but just one more. I have to get back. Sure you do. Ain't moving a bitch. It is, Lewis agreed. And then for a time they were silent. The silence was a comfortable one, as if they had known each other for a long time. This was a feeling about Lewis which Lewis had read in books, but which he had never experienced until now. He felt ashamed of his casual thoughts about free medical advice earlier. On the road, a semi roared by, its running lights twinkling like earth stars. That's one mean road, all right, Crandall repeated thoughtfully, almost vaguely, and then turned to Lewis. There was a peculiar little smile on his seamed mouth. He poked a Chesterfield into one corner of his smile and popped a match with his thumbnail. You remember the path there where your little girl commented on? For a moment, Lewis didn't. Ellie had commented on a whole catalog of things before finally collapsing for the night. Then he did remember the wide mown patch winding up through the copse of trees and over the hill. Yes, I do. You promised to tell her about it sometime. I did and I will, Crandall said. The path goes into the woods about a mile and a half. The local kids around Route 15 and Middle Drive keep it nice because they use it. Kids come and go. There's a lot more moving around than there used to be when I was a boy. Then you picked a place out and stuck to it. but they seem to tell each other, and every spring a bunch of them mow the path. They keep it all nice all summer long. Not all of the adults in town know it's there. A lot of them do, of course, but not all. Not by a long chalk, but all of the kids do. I bet on it. No, what's there? The pet cemetery, Crandall said. Pet cemetery, Lewis repeated, bemused. It's not as old as it probably sounds, Crandall said, smoking and rocking. It's the road. It used to lead up. Uses a lot of animals. The road does. Dogs and cats mostly, but that ain't all. One of these big Orenco trucks run down the pet raccoon the rider children used to keep. That was back, Christ, must have been 73, maybe earlier. Before the state made keeping a coon or even a denatured skunk illegal, anyways. Why did they do that? Rabies, Crandall said. A lot of rabies in Maine now. There was a big old St. Bernard went rabid downstate a couple of years ago and killed 4 people. That was hell of a thing. Dogs hadn't had his shots. If those foolish people had seen that dog had its shorts, it never would have happened. But a coon or a skunk, you can vaccinate it twice a year and still it don't always take. But the coon the rider boy had, that was what the old-timers used to call a sweet coon. It'd waddle right up to you, gory wasn't he fat, the lick you face like a dog. Their dad even paid a vet to spray him and declaw him. That must have cost him country fortune. Ryder, he worked for IMB in Bangor. They went out to Colorado 5 years ago, or maybe it was 6. Funny to think of those 2 almost old enough to drive. When they broke up over the coon, I guess they were. Matty Ryder cried so long with his mom that his mom got scared and wanted to take him to the doctor. I suppose he's over it now, but they never forget. When a good animal gets run down in a road, a kid never forgets. Lewis's mind turned to Ellie, as he had last seen her tonight, fast asleep, with Church purring rustily on the foot of the mattress. My daughter's got a cat, he said, Winston Churchill. He called him Church for short. Do they climb when he walks? I beg your pardon? Lewis had no idea what he was talking about. He's still got his ball, or he's been fixed? No, Lewis. No, he hadn't been fixed. In fact, there had been some trouble over that back in Chicago. Rachel had wanted to get Church sprayed, had even made the appointment with the vet. Lewis canceled it. Even now, he wasn't really sure why. It wasn't anything as simple or as stupid as equating his masculinity with what of his daughter's Tom, nor even his resentment at the idea that Church would have to be castrated so that the fat housewife next door wouldn't need to be troubled with twisting down the lids of her plastic garbage cans. Those things had been part of it, but most of it had been a vague but strong feeling that it would destroy something in Church that he himself valued. That it would put out the go-to-hell look in the cat's green eyes. Finally, he had pointed out to Rachel that they were moving to the country and shouldn't be a problem. Now here was Judson Crandall, pointing out that part of the country living in Ludlow consisted of dealing with Route 15, and asked him if the cat was fixed. Try a little irony. Dr. Creed, it's good for you, blood. Good for your blood. I'd get him fixed, Crandall said, crushing his smoke between his thumbs and forefingers. A fixed cat don't tend to wander as much, but if it's all the time crossing back and forth, its luck will run out, and it'll end up there with the rider's kids, Coon, and a little Timmy's Dessler's cocker spaniel, and Mrs. Brandy's parakeet. Now that the parakeet got run over in the road, you understand. It just went feet up one day. I'll take it under advisement, Lewis said. You do that, Crandall said, and stood up. How's that beer doing? I believe I'll go in for a slice of old Mr. Rat after all. Beer's gone, Lewis said, also standing, and I ought to go too. Big day tomorrow. Starting in at the university, Lewis nodded. The kids don't come back for 2 weeks, but then I ought to know what I'm doing, don't you think? Yeah, if you don't know where the pills are, I guess you'll have trouble. Crandall offered his hand, and Lewis shook it, mindful again of the fact that the bones pained easily. Come on over any evening, he said. Want you to meet my Norma. Think she'd enjoy you. I'll do that, Lewis said. Nice to meet you, Judd. Same goes both ways. You'll settle in. May even stay a while. I hope we do. Lewis walked down the crazy paved path to the shoulder of the road and had to pause while yet another truck, this one followed by a line of 5 cars headed in the direction of Bucksport, passed by. Then, raising his hand in a short salute, he crossed the street road, he reminded himself again, and let himself into the new house. He was quiet with the sound of sleep. Ellie appeared not to have moved at all, and Gage was still in his crib, sleeping in typical Gage fashion, spread eagled on his back, a bottle within easy reach. Lewis paused, then looked at his son, his heart absolutely filled with love for the boy, so strong that it seemed almost dangerous. He supported part of it was simply homesickness for all the familiar Chicago places and Chicago faces that were now gone, erased so effectively by the miles that they might have never been at all. There's a lot more moving around that there used to be. You picked a place and out and you stuck there. There was some truth in that. He went to his son, and because there was no one there to see him do it, not even Rachel, he kissed his fingers and then pressed them lightly and briefly to Gage's cheek. Through the bars of the crib. Gage clucked and turned over on his side. "Sleep well, baby," Lewis said. He undressed quietly and slipped into the half of the bed that was, for now, just two single mattresses pushed together on the floor. He felt the strain of the day beginning to pass. Rachel didn't stir. Unpacked boxes bulked ghostly in the room. Just before sleep, Lewis hiked himself up on one elbow and looked out the window. The room was in the front of the house, and he could look across the road at the Crandall place. It was too dark to see shapes on a moonlit night. It would not have been, but he could see the cigarette ember over there. Still up, he thought. He'll maybe be up for a long time. The old sleep poorly. Perhaps they stand watch. Against what? Lewis was thinking about when he slipped into sleep. He dreamed he was in Disney World, driving a bright white van with a red cross on the side. Gage was beside him, and in the dream, Gage was at least 10 years old. Church was on the white van's dashboard, looking at Lewis with his bright green eyes, and out on the main street by the 1890s train station, Mickey Mouse was shaking hands with the children clustered around him, his big white cartoon gloves swallowing their small, trusting hands. The next few weeks were busy ones for the family. Little by little, Lewis's new job began to shake down for him. How it would be when 10,000 students, many of them drug and liquor abusers, some afflicted with social diseases, some anxious about grades or depressed about leaving home for the first time, a dozen of them girls, mostly anorexic. How it would be when all of them converged on the campus at once would be something else again. And while Lewis began getting a handle on his job as head of University Medical Services, Rachel began to get a handle on the house. Gage was busy taking the bumps and spills that went with getting used to his new environment, and for a while his nighttime schedule was badly out of whack, but by the middle of their second week in Ludlow, he had begun to sleep through again. Only Ellie, with the prospect of beginning kindergarten in a new place before her, seemed always overexcited and on a hair trigger. She was apt to go into prolonged giggling fits or periods of almost menopausal depression or temper tantrums at the drop of a word. Rachel said Ellie would get over it when she saw that the school was not the great devil she had made it out to be in her own mind. And Lewis thought Rachel was right. Most of the time, Ellie was what she had always been, a dear. His evening beer, or with Judd Crandall, became something of a habit. Around the time Gage began sleeping through again, Lewis began bringing his own six-pack over every second or third night. He met Normal Crandall, a sweetly pleasant woman who had rheumatoid arthritis, filthy old rheumatoid arthritis, which killed so much of what could be good in the old ages of men and women who are otherwise healthy, but her attitude was good. She would not surrender to the pain. There would be no white flags. Let it take her if it could. Lewis thought she might have another 5 or 7 years productive, if not terribly comfortable years ahead of her. Going completely against his own established customs, he examined her at his own instigation, inventoried the precautions her own doctor had given her, and found them to be completely in order. He felt a nagging disappointment that there was nothing else he could do or suggest for her, but her doctor, Weybridge, had things as under control as they were ever going to be for Norma Crandall, barring some sudden breakthrough, which was possible but not to be counted upon. Yes, learned to accept, or you ended up in a small room writing letters home with Crayolas. Rachel liked her, and they had sealed their friendship by exchanging recipes the way small boys trade baseball cards, beginning with Norma Crandall, deep dish apple pie for Rachel's beef stroganoff. Norma was taking both of a Creed children, particularly with Ellie, who, she thought, was going to be an old-time beauty. At least Lewis told Rachel that night in bed. Norma hadn't said Ellie was going to grow into a real sweet coon. Rachel laughed so hard she broke explosive wind, and then both of them laughed so hard and loudly that they woke up Gage in the next room. The first day of kindergarten arrived. Lewis, who felt pretty well in control of the infirmary and the medical support facilities, now took the day off. Besides, the infirmary was currently dead empty. The last patient, a summer student who had broken her leg in the student union steps, had been discharged a week before. He stood on the lawn beside Rachel, engaged in the arms, as the big yellow bus made the turn from Middle Drive and lumbered to a stop in front of their house. The doors at the front folded open. The babble and squawk of many children drifted out on the mild September air. Ellie cast a strange, vulnerable glance back over her shoulder, as if to ask them if there might be yet time to abort to inevitable process, and probably when she saw on the faces of her parents convicted her that it was time to go, that the time was gone, and everything which would follow this day was simply inevitable. Like the progress of Norma Crandall's arthritis, she turned away from them and mounted the steps of the bus. The doors folded shut with a gasp of dragon's breath. The bus pulled away. Rachel burst into tears. "Don't, for Christ's sake," Lewis said. He wasn't crying, only damn near. "It's only half a day." "Half a day is bad enough," Rachel answered in a scolding voice and began to cry harder. Lewis held her, and Gage slipped an arm comfortably around each parent's neck. Then Rachel cried. Gage usually cried too, but not this time. He was us to himself, Lewis thought, and he damn well knew it. They waited with some trepidation for Ellie to return, drinking too much coffee, speculating on how it was going for her. Lewis went out into the back room that was going to be his study and messed about idly, moving papers from one place to another by not doing much else. Rachel began lunch absurdly early. When the phone rang as 10:15, Rachel raced for it and answered with a breathless hello. Before it could ring a second time, Lewis stood in the doorway between his office and the kitchen. Sure, it would be Ellie, telling them that she had decided Ellie couldn't hack it. The stomach of public education had found her indigestible and was spitting her back, but it was only Norma Crandall calling to tell that the Judd had picked the last of the corn and they were welcomed for a dozen ears if they wanted to. Lewis went over with a shopping bag and scolded Judd for not letting him help pick it. "Most of it ain't worth a tin shit anyway," Judd said. "You'll kindly spare that talk while I'm around," Norma said. She came out on the porch with iced tea on an antique Coca-Cola tray. "Sorry, my love." "He ain't sorry a bit," Norma said to Lewis, and sat down with a wince. "Saw Ellie go on the bus," Judd said, lighting a Chesterfield. "She'll be fine," Norma said. "They almost always are." Almost, Lewis thought morbidly. But Ellie was fine. She came home at noon, smiling and sunny, her blue first day of school dress belling gracefully around her scabbed shins, and there was a new scab on her knee to marvel over. A picture of what might have been two children, or perhaps two walking gantries in one hand, one shoe united, one ribbon missing from her hair, shouting, "We sang Old MacDonald, Mommy, Daddy. We sang Old MacDonald. Same one as in the Carstairs Street School." Rachel glanced over at Lewis, who was sitting in the window seat with Gage on his lap. The baby was almost asleep. There was something sad in Rachel's glance, and although she looked away quickly, Lewis felt a moment of terrible panic. "We're really going to get old," he thought. "It's really true. No one's going to make an exception for us. She's on her way, and so are we." Ellie ran over to him, trying to show him her picture, her new scrape, and tell him about Old MacDonald and Mrs. Berryman all at the same time. Church was twinning in and out between her legs, purring loudly, and Ellie was somehow almost miraculously not tripping over him. "Shh," Lewis said, and kissed her. Gage had gone to sleep, mindful of all the excitement. "Just let me put the baby to bed, and then I'll listen to everything." He took Gage up the stairs, walking through hot, slanting September sunshine, and as he reached the landing, such a premonition of horror and darkness struck him Then he stopped cold, and looked around in surprise, wondering what could possibly have come over him. He held the baby tighter, almost clutching him, and Gage stirred uncomfortably. Lewis's arms and back had broken out in great rashes of goose flesh. What's wrong? He wondered, confused and frightened. His heart was racing. His scalp felt cold and abruptly too small to cover his skull. He could feel the surge of adrenaline behind his eyes. Human eyes really did bug out when fear was extreme. He knew they did not just widen, but actually bulged as blood pressure climbed and the hydrostatic pressure of the cranial fluids increased. What the hell is it? Ghost? Christ, it really feels as if something just brushed by me in this hallway, something I almost saw. Downstairs, the screen door whacked against the frame. Lewis Creed jumped, almost screamed, and then laughed. It was simply one of those psychological cold pockets people sometimes pass through, no more, no less. A momentary fugue. They happened, that was all. What had Scrooge said to the ghost of Jacob Marley? You may be more than an underdone bit of potato. There's my gravy then gave to you. And that was more correct psychologically, as well as psychologically than Charles Dickens had probably known. There were no ghosts, at least not in his experience. He had pronounced 24 people dead in his career and had never once felt the passage of a soul. He took Gage into his bed and laid him in the crib as he pulled the blanket over his son, though a shudder twisted up his back and he thought suddenly of his Uncle Carl's showroom. No new cars there, no televisions were all the modern feature, no dishwashers with glass fronts so you could watch the magical sudsing action, only boxes with their lids up, carefully hidden spotlights over each. His brother was an undertaker. Good God, what have you the horrors? Let it go, dump it. He kissed his son and went down to listen to Ellie tell about her first day at the big kids' school. Thus ends the reading, part 1 of Pet Cemetery with your narrator, Isaac. If you enjoyed, please hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next episode.